To me here this evening. I said it's a lovely room, isn't it? I've got to talk a bit faster tonight because I'm limited to time. But I put 120 slides on for this tonight. Well, anyhow, I'll go back to that. This is my family, or my late mum and dad, but I'm one of 10 boys and 3 girls. All right, there now. That young lady there is my twin sister. I live right next door to my twin sister. My oldest brother, Jim, there, he's 83 and been married 65 years. So anyhow, look, I'll go on. That's me over there, I think. That's me, that's Roger, that's Joey, that's my late mother, that's Michael, that's David, that's Hubie, my father, my twin sister, that's Stephen, Jenny, Jeffrey, and Malcolm. I didn't forget their names. Anyhow, just to talk that's a bit about ale. See, most of them are down there, but we're talking about ale tonight, all right. And this is in a little book, 1877. A dirtier, squalor, less interesting town than Hale is not to be found in all of Cornwall. Its population is composed of fishermen and miners, of labourers and its 2 iron founders, or 10 smelting works, and railway employees. So therefore, we recommend the tourists to leave Hale as quickly as you enter it. All right. We are a World Heritage Site. There's 10 sites there, but there's one up there, look. That there bit is in England, but we won't worry about that, all right? We're down here in Cornwall tonight. Cornish Copper Company, 1756 is when they come into Hale from Camborne, and they carried on smelting until about 1818, smelting copper. Then they carried on then casting iron, the same as Harvey's, up until 1867. Right, Harvey's of Hale, 1779, they come from a place called Carnal, up near Camborne again. John Harvey, he was born 1730, lived till 1803. Henry Harvey was 1775, he lived till 1750. And they carried on as Harvey's of Hale till 1903. That's from 1779, a lot of years, isn't it? We'll go back there. Now, Henry Harvey, John Harvey had 4 sons and 4 daughters. Sadly, he lost 3 sons, but he only had 1 son less, was Henry, as he said, born 1775. Anyhow, Henry had a little, might be on there, I don't think any, but he had a little lady friend called Gracie. He didn't live with her, but she had 10 children by him. And the middle name was Harvey. If it comes on, it don't matter. And then at the end, when they decided we weren't going to have no more, they put the G on the end of Tonkin instead of Tonki. He added the G, so he knew they were his children. But we know that sadly one of his sisters died, and she left 6 children. So Henry, as a single man, took they on as well. And then we talk about Jane Harvey that married Richard Trevidick. They had 6 children, but he was away a lot. So he took them on, so he was a single man with 22 children. Now, this is what ale is all about, you know, about what was being made, part of the Industrial Revolution. Here we are, look, he worked in there, so I'll go on from that, 1793 until 1865, but he leased the house up by St Michael's Hospital, if anybody know that. Just up there is the Melanier House, and that's what he leased, so I suppose he used to go up there when it got dark. You know. Anyway, he didn't want to know who was up there. Anyhow, that was Gracie up there. All right, I put this in, this is a plantation. You've heard of the King George V Memorial Walk. A lot of people go down there by the swimming pool. This is King George VI Walk, plantation. Now, the reason I put that in is when Henry Harvey was going to retire in 1850, but sadly in 1848 he had a stroke. But they were building, because it's right opposite Asda in Hale, like a port, I think it was going to build a house up there. They started digging down, that got his men to dig the road down. They got down to 4 feet, and they come across this. This was a burial, and it was somebody that it's not that, this is it, it's called a Cunady stone, 4 feet down, and it was somebody that passed away aged 30 in the 5th century. So we know that Hale was used as a trade route coming up from the north of England all the way down to Hale, through St Earth, up to Relovis, and overland a little bit to St Michael's and then over to Europe. So we know that that's a part of the trade route. This is just a mill pond down Hale. Richard Trevidick, 1771 to 1833. Well, we know he was a fantastic inventor because he invented that thing. But he married Jane Harvey. Now, she was born in 1772. They got married in 1797, and she lived till 1868. So she was 96 when she died. But he snuffed it early. So this is where, going up again to the hospital, this is, I call it Pencleaf, they've got a different name. This is where Jane Trevidick lived after Richard had passed away. This is where she lived. Now, the Puffin Devil, a lot of people have heard about this. But you've got to imagine that Henry Harvey was he was in the foundry, he was the boss. You know, Richard Trevidick, I don't know if you heard of like a Jan Luker. I'm not being disrespectful to ladies, but a lot of men, if you're working in a factory and you're doing a bit of welding and you want someone done from home, you do what you call a Jan Luker. You're getting done dinner time or evening when the boss isn't around. See? So Richard Trevidick used to come down to Henry and say, look, I've got this idea. Can he make this up? Can he make that up? Well, this is what he come up with. He invented the first high-pressure steam vehicle to go on the road. And that was 24th of December, 1801. And in 1804, he went to Pennydower in South Wales, converted that car into a train, and he pulled 5 carriages, 70 people, 9.1 miles, just to prove. So there's your first train and your first car. I'll go back to that one quickly because all the woodwork was made up Camber. You heard the song Going Up Camber Hill Coming Down. Well, that Puffin Devil went up, say, 24th of December. It went up Camber Hill. There is a Camber Hill. Went up backwards. And that's what all the song is all about. So, never went on to hell, went up Camber. But there we are. I put this one in. This is down Foundry. Anybody ever been down there? I mean, they're in the wall there now because they've got a lot of tourists come down, so they've had to widen the road a bit. But anyhow, this was the first railway station. If you know the railway station's up the top now, this was the first railway station in the gardens by ISIS. By Asda. It's called the ISIS Gardens. But that was 1837. That railway went up on the terrace over to King George's. You all know where Marks and Sparks is, down Hale. Well, anyhow, up across there to Ingarrick, and it ended up in Trezevine in Lanner. That's where it ended. But they went, and of course, they went into all the mines in Camborne, Redruves, all over. They took goods in and brought goods out. And they all come back to that station. That was demolished in 1948. Well, you can't see it, but there's a lovely town clock there, but I've covered it with that word first station. This is the, we talk about coming in from St Ives, going up the Cornish Copper Company and Harvest of Hale. Now, this is the foundry, Harvest Foundry. This here bridge was designed by Isambard Kingdom Brunel, another year, and that was a single track, 1852. Single track that was, coming from Redruce really, went down to Penzance, but that was only poles and wood, that's all it was. And the one you go in there and see now is all granite. Well, that was put up in 1888. I will say that Isambard Kingdom Brunel, he had all his work done by the Cornish Copper Company, and Richard Trevidick had his done by Harvest. All right? Now put this one in. You can see that's the White Hart there. This is part of what Harvest was. Again, up there is a royal crest, and we don't know why that, but they got it. But that's 1838 that was built. But that is the first White Hart. 1824. That was built by Henry Harvey, because I said to you that Jane Harvey, she had 6 children. Richard left Hale and went out to South America in Peru and all, 1816 till 1827. He never sent no money home or nothing. So Henry Harvey built this hotel there, and then so that she could have people coming in and stay there, and then that was where she earned a living for her 6 children. See, then that was built. She retired in 1837, then went up to Pencleath. This is the White Hart that you can see there now. Here's one other one there. You can see it there now. This. I don't think you remember this, but this was a Lloyd's Bank, but it was only single time week because they had a fire in 1935. I put this in. This is a grist mill because you was having horses and mills and all coming from not Falmouth, Halston, all the way to Penzance and St Ives, coming in with goods to go on the train and for ore for smelting and making iron. They needed to feed the horses. So a grist mill is where they grind the corn, and that was fed by the mill pond with a water wheel. So that was the grist mill. You've got a Canubia Biscuit Works, you can see there. Now, that was put there. That was one of the first, so they recognised, automated biscuit factories in England. And that was from 1895 to about 1917, making biscuits. But this here also, in the early 1900s, was a mint humbug factory. So it's got a bit of history.
That smells nice.
Yeah, lovely. Here we are, look. That's That's a better picture. But say that's the first White Hart there. And this here, see, was Lloyd's Bank. Now that was, we call that the square down there. That was built in 1868. But they had a fire in 1935, and I suppose the bank, because that used to be a cinema down Foundry. They've got one up Copperhouse, but this was a cinema as well down Foundry. But that burnt down in 1935, so they took the top story off and just put a roof on it. We're talking about horsepower, manpower. A lot of people say we talk about horsepower. Well, this is just to prove, this is reopening the wheel bore on the way to Halston, Carleen there. That's just a big tank there. There's 36 horses there towing that. 36. So imagine, any one time in Isle, any one day, would be 500 horses coming in and out. Of course, they had to be fed and watered. So now, anybody know the White Hart at all? No? You're going to St Michael's Hospital. The big White Hart there is in the town. Now this here was the we'll say the machine shop and the workshop for Harvest of Hale. When they were casting stuff, it was no good putting it on a ship, sending it out to America or Africa, and then they don't fit. So they used to machine them all in there, and then put them together, and then they knew they were right, and then they could load them on the ships and send them away. But in 1984, the council decided they wanted a bit more housing. This was passed on a Thursday for housing, and 10 days later, they didn't put the houses up in 10 days, but 10 days later, it was all demolished. And as we know, even in this town, there's lots of buildings that, what they do with them, just pull them out of the way, didn't they? So Hale town, what is it, Hale? Anyhow, something to do with Hale in 1984 was formed to save what we have, but we've changed it to Hale Heritage, and that's who I've been with since 2013. But that's all there's there now, it's nothing but houses. So we're trying to preserve the rest of what we got in Hale. Now, the biggest cylinders ever made in the world, were built by Harvest of Hale. The Dutch government come over in about 1864. 1846. They come over because, anybody been to Schiphol Airport? Yes. Well, in 1846, it was 20 feet underwater.
Oh, yes, it was, yes.
Well, anyhow, the Dutch government come over at Haarlemmer Lake, and they wanted what the industry could design and pump that lake out, because you know how low Holland is. Well, they come to Harvest of Hale, the Cornish Cover Company, and Pernawerdo. This is one of the gentlemen that come up with the idea. That's Jabez Bickle, that's Francis Harvey, and that's Billy Gilbert. You can tell who the boss is looking at their hats. But you imagine that's 12 foot there in diameter, never ever been created anywhere else. They built 3 lots of them to go on ships. They even built ships on Hale to take them. We estimate that at 25 tons. And then they went over. And they started pumping in 1848, and by the summer of 1851, the 3 pumping stations had created over 112 square miles. Imagine that, 112 square miles of land. And the Crucius, I don't know if it's on the next one, no. The Crucius, which is the one that they use as a museum, the other 2 were destroyed, and the last one was called the Crucius. That was still pumping in 1931. Now, I'll tell you a little quick story. I think some of you heard me last week talking about it, but you look at these here like this, they're joined with bolts, you see, all the cylinders joined with bolts. Well, I went over there in 2018. I've never been anywhere in my life really, but I went there for 3 days to see what this was all about. So I had a nice tour in this particular day. Then when we finished, I said, oh, I have a cup of tea, so I had a bit of cup of tea and a bit of cake. And then this lady come forward, you know who she was, and she presented me with a little box. While I was doing the tour and all, they'd gone down in that machine, taken off a nut, and presented to me, which was cast in Hale in 1846. But when I got back to the airport, I put it in my suitcase. And then my name was called out. And then they wanted to know what this nut was. I didn't bring it tonight, but I can show that I have got it. And I told them that it was made in Hale, and all he turned up, he turned around everybody, he said, 1 nut taking another nut over. And that is true. Now, the Foundry Chapel, 1845, I put this one in because this has held a lot of significance for my family. As I said, like 10 boys, 3 girls. Well, my twin sister was near enough the last person married in there. I think the vicar looked at all of us lot and he thought, God almighty. So I think he shut the doors, but it was actually closed just after my sister got married. That was 1845. That was built. Ramley, the biggest ship ever built in Hale. Harbour's built 79 ships altogether during the time from 1823 till about 1895. And this was the biggest ship, that was 4,000 tons. Just built in where Asda is now. But this is a very interesting, this is SS Cornubia. That was built in 1857. It was the fastest steam paddle ship afloat at the time. And it was used for applying from Liverpool around to other airports and all, you see, because it was so fast. But when the American Civil War started, the Confederates bought it. And they used it as a gun runner. And it couldn't be touched for, well, 2.5 years before they actually captured it. So, made in ale. Harbour's Emporium. That's what we call just like a shop, like a supermarket. Henry Harvey's a very, very clever man. If you worked for Harvey's, you had to have, he had all these shops. So he sold everything. So he'd give you half your money in wages, half in tokens. And then you had to go in his shops and buy all that you wanted from Harbours of Ale. But the government brought out a Truck Act in 1831. And what that said was, that if you earn £5 this week, you should be paid £5. Well, it never got down to Ale or anywhere else until the late 1800s, about 1881, 1882, before it got in Ale. So if you're ever going down through Ale, past the shop on the corner, as you're going down towards Foundry, look on the left, there's shops in all the gardens. As soon as the Truck Act became law down here, everybody built shops in their gardens. So the Emporium then. So that's how long he got away with it, you know. Now, Isambard, King and Brunel, 1806, 1859, 53, no age, is it? Put this one in. Look at these chains. See, they never had McSolvers, did they? For lifting up cranes. So we talk about manpower again, you see. Everything was lifting and pushing and shoving. But there's Isambard. The Royal Albert Bridge. I put this in as 1857. Right, that's near enough because it was open. We'll see them. It should be open 1859. But all these links, all these bars and all these over there were made by the Cornish Copper Company in Hale. So that was in the cast in iron. 11th of April, 1895, 1859. Fancy going over there on a trial on a train. I wouldn't go, would you? The bridge was officially opened on 2nd of May, 1859. But Isambard came down and he went across that because he died in September 1859. And we all think that the Clifton Suspension Bridge was designed by Isambard, King of Brunel. But he never saw it built because it wasn't completed till 1864. Because the council said you could never span a gorge. So eventually they did agree to do that and they used his materials and his designs and it's still there. So again in Hale, by the swimming pool, coming down through, all the houses up the top are called Clifton Terrace because all the bosses from the Cornish Copper Company lived up there. So, and this is what he was involved in. Oh, I'll go back to that. See that there middle stanchion there like that? That's 80 feet down in the water. Imagine they had to go down in the 1850s, look, 80 feet to find bedrock. So it was a clever designer altogether. Now, the Great Western, 1837. I just put this in 1,300 tons. SS Great Britain, well, we know that's in Bristol now, but that was in 1843, and it was brought back in 1970 by some businessmen. They found it out near the Falklands, and they rebuilt it. I've never been up Bristol, not yet to see it, but the Great Eastern, look at this difference, 18,000 ton, all by Isambard, King and Brunel's design. That's the point of it. He built this so big because he'd heard a place down the road called Australia, and they needed, because it was steam, everything was steam, they needed a ship big enough to load it up with coal, go down to Australia with goods, load up with other goods and bring them back. Time that was launched in 1858, they discovered coal in Australia. So, but it was still used, it went down there, but what it was mainly used for was laying transatlantic cables all the way over to America, Africa, India, etc., etc. So it was a massive ship then. Then you've got bridges, docks, hospital railways, and the Thames Tunnel. The Thames Tunnel again was designed by Isambard, and he and his son was called Isambard, was only 3 years old. They were the first two people to walk through the Thames Tunnel. He took his son right through. That's how confident he was, because we know it was always flooding and they had pumps and all the pumps were being made by Harvest. But they said all this here lot was built by Cornish Copper Company. Now it was because I met somebody here 2 weeks ago. I was up the other place up there, and the gentleman said I used to go to school in Hale, Wagner School. That's where it started. See, that was, and there was 8 boarders there. I'll just go on from this because I know I've got to watch my time. It was the first grammar school, but here we are, 1891, and by 1911, it said that it was up by Hale Station. That's where it was. And they even had a train coming from Penzance, especially to bring the pupils in. And if they wanted to go for a swim, because it's just a giant house into flats now, they would have to go down on Carnsue Pool for a swim. And if they wanted to go play sport, they had to go up Barville on a farm where loads of cows, so they had to pick up all the cow doings so they could play football or whatever they wanted to play. Of course, Hale's school, the secondary school, was built in 1957, so they were paying to go there, and then they dwindled right down and they closed in 1964. That little coat, I've tried it on, it don't quite fit me. But I have got, that's the coat, I took a photograph of it. You know, people are leaving me all sorts of stuff, it's quite nice really. But anyways, so whoever, I don't know who the gentleman was, but he come up, he said, I used to go Hale School, that's just 1962. Now we're up to the hospital now, Miss Frances Ellis. I'll just have a quick drink. Miss Frances Ellis come from London. And in today's money, she had the equivalent of £14 million. Today's money. And she was the ass. I wish I'd met her myself. But anyhow.
You would have been a toy.
I don't mind, there'd be plenty of money there. Anyhow, she come all the way down here, and then she bought the Downs. That's St Michael's. That's the Downs. Now the Downs was built in 1880. But anybody know the Bird Paradise? You probably heard of it. Yeah, well that was built in 1862. That's all to do with Harvest. The Downs was built for Mr. Rollins that worked for Harvest. I'm not confusing you, am I? No. Right. Well, that was in 1880. She come down here in 1901, Miss Ellis, and then this was up for sale, so she bought. You've got to imagine there was no hospital then. That was called Banks Croft. She come down here, and then she invited the Daughters of the Liege, that was from Holland, they were Roman Catholics, to come over and come into the Downs, and she give them the Downs and all this ground. And she said only on the condition that her sister and herself can stay there until they die. If you ever go to St Michael's, you'll see the statue of St Michael's. That was put there in 1933, because she died in 1930. That was put there in her memory. So, anyhow. And I go back. That there, they started building that in about 1912, having it built. And it was opened on the week before the First World War. So it was a very low-key thing. And you've got to imagine down here, what they did was, the Daughters of Liege done, was this was for people that didn't have a lot of money. And up there was for people that could afford to pay. The people that paid helped to subsidize the people that didn't have a lot of money. This was the first phase of it. All this was granite, and this would come from all the local mollings brought down, so they wanted to save a lot of money, so that was where all the granite come from in the beginning. Henry Jenner, I bet nobody know. I'm a Cornish bard. I learned the Cornish language from my sins, but anyway, I'm a Cornish bard. And Henry Jenner, he was born in 1848, and he died in 1936. Henry Jenner, he married Mr. Rollins' daughter Kitty, and they moved into there. And when I was a youngster, the nurses used to come there. That was after they had passed on. Him and his wife Kitty had passed on. The Daughters of the Liege took it over, and that was the nurses' home. So they would a lot come from Ireland, of course, we know that, come over. And this is where they would do their training, you see. And now it's called now the Mary Therese House. It's for people that got long-term disabilities who can go there for, I say, 12 months or whatever, but that's what it is now, you know. But the nuns actually finished in St Michael's Hospital in 1976. We are, look at that. That's in the first operating theatre. I've got to tell you a little story, and it is true. My late father, when he was getting on a bit, he worked on a farm all his life. You know, fantastic. He only had one. He had two arms, but injured in the war, so he only had one arm that was good. So he went farming. But the last 9 years of his life, up until he retired, he worked with a nun's arm in the Downs. You see, but we weren't allowed to go in there because it was a closed order. Some of the father worked in the gardens, you know, and so they grew everything that they wanted. Well, on my last day of my father, when you were 65 then, 2 years ago, you had to finish work. My dad didn't want to finish because he didn't know nothing, you see, nothing else. He got that upset, we put him in the hospital, we had to give him a tranquilizer, and put him in the bed on his last day of working. And he said when he woke up 3 o'clock in the morning, it made me laugh, and he said he didn't know where he was, he didn't know if he was in Edinburgh now, because there was 3 nuns around his bed praying for him. Well, that's a dedication of what they, you know, people think all these nuns, but they were absolutely fabulous, absolutely. My dad, you know. So, 2018, I went and did a talk up in the Downs, this new private residential home now, and I talked to them a bit about my dad, and they gave me permission then. I could walk down the gardens and walk with my father walked. Now, this is the smelting works. 1837 until 19. No, they closed in 1916, but they shut it down really in 1920. But this is the sort of size. You look at the gentleman there. Look, these were massive buildings. This was by the mill pond. It was called Melanier. Well, they demolished it by the Second World War, and now it's houses. Big Melanier house in the state now. There you are. That's what I was talking about. That bridge there. There's Harvest then, look. That's Harvest there. But see, that's all the granite now. If you ever come into Hale, again, you might do one day, and you get down just before you go, the road goes under and back on itself again. You go, as you're coming down through, there's a Julius Hospice shop right there. Just stop and look at, where we to, main road, yeah, there. It's actually, one of the pillars is sunk 12 inches. They've reinforced it all there, but when you look, you think, so I had to tell everybody, if you're coming down Hale, get off Camber and catch a bus. It's pretty, it is airy, but it's being monitored every 6 months. It's sinking. This is, well, I got North Quay, but this is all the quays. This is South Quay, that's where Asda is, that's East Quay, and that's North Quay. There's a bridge there. Is that one there you've got to look at? That one there. Keynsham. This was a barge that was put in when they started sluicing. They started pumping because the sluices weren't working no more in the 1980s. So they was pumping wet sand into that, and that was drilled full of holes so the water could come out. And they pumped the sand from there up the top. Well, at one stage, half the dunes with 6 chalets in it all floated out because they forgot they built it all up in the back. And there was still water in it, and it pushed all the dry sand, and when the big tides come in, they lost 6 chalets eventually. Hale Electric, we're talking about North Quay now, 1910 is when they needed electric, down Hale, down St Ives, everywhere they wanted electric, so they thought, well, there you've got the ships coming in, you've got the railways and all, so you've got all the infrastructure you needed. 1910 they started, and by 1911, end of 1911, they were producing electricity. That's, you know, no meetings in, they just got on with the job. I know I'm rushing it a little bit, but...
No, you're fine.
Now, they had pylons, there's electric works there, look at me. They had pylons, all these had to go over to the Lent, and then over to go St Ives. Talking about, you know, early, just in the First World War. Well, when Harvest finished in 1903, Wards bought Harvest, the South Quay, and they used it to scrap. So they started bringing in the Grand Fleet in the First World War, some of them, to scrap them in Hale. So what they do is when they bring in a ship like this to be cut up, they take all the good bits out. What they forgot was, when you take all the good bits out, when the tide is like this, the boat is a lot higher than what they anticipated. So that's what happened. So now he's never had no electric for a week or two. Ripped the lot down. Anyhow. Now this, because they had to have water going into the electric. This is, you're going to smile at me now, I hope. That's where the water come in mainly from there. We've always in Hale called it a tripod. But that's the only tripod I know got 4 sides. When you go down Ash Hill, anybody see the tripod? That's where it is there. I mean, it's not there now, it's gone. But I got lots of photos and all everything about it. That's the lamp there. Yeah. Well, it's 3-sided, yeah. That's 4-sided. No, it's just a thing. But we always called it, I think we were silly, we're good up to 3, but we just call it the tripod. This is the electric works in the early 1930s there. Everything upgraded in 1938. It was upgrading all the time because they had to keep making it better and better to produce more electricity and one of things like this. Unloading coal in the 1950s. On an average month, they'd have between 50 and 60 boats in unloading coal from South Wales coming in to the power station. There's a minor strike, well, nothing there then. 1972. Not long after that, 1976. There's the 4 cranes that was there working. I'm just showing the size of the electric works there eventually. When I was doing this talk, I met the 2 men that actually built these 2, they were from a group, they were called Gilbert. And they said there's over 1 million bricks in them, and then when they went to watch it being demolished, it must have been awful for them. That was just the back elevation. There we are. But it actually closed in 1976. They said the miners' strike 1972, but I think for economical reasons they thought if anything else go wrong, we can't get no coal in the thing. So anyway, it's all nuclear now. But that is 1981. That was they were demolished. Here we are, 1981. Now we go on. Just anybody been over North Quay? No, been over. You see the big cranes? Yeah. Well, at the end of them cranes, that is still there. Now that was the calcinating works from the 1850s. They was producing arsenic until the early 1900s. And then in 1917, it became a glassworks till 1925. But the only thing they couldn't do, Eric was only a short 8 years, was the fact is they could produce brown, green, blue, any colour you like, but they couldn't produce clear glass. So it closed down. But that is still there. This is just one of, if you ever anybody go over by the Bluff Hotel, a Reverend Auchen, he was the man in charge of Philip, and he wanted to make a bit of money, so over by the Bluff somewhere there's a mine, and he named it Wheel Lucy after his daughter, and all the rubbish used to tip on the sand. I'm still looking for them, I'm going to have them. Now GC3 is up, which is next to electric works. You've got to imagine, when we're into the Second World War now, they needed ethyl dibromide. It was an element from warm water. I remember all this, you know. An element but you couldn't get it from the North Sea. You could only get it down this way. And they needed ethyl dibromide to go into our planes in the Second World War. The Germans didn't know because we used to buy it from France. So we had to build our own building. And we thought it was a lipstick factory. It was like hell, but because it was supposed to be top secret. But look, it just says for ethyl dibromide. But they started in August 1939 building it, and then it was, and by July 1940, look, it was already on 450 men. 1939, 1940 was the coldest winter ever on record. And now they built a tunnel. This is Carnsue, as is over here. I might have a photo of Carnsue there, but that was built by Henry Harvey in 1834. I got to show you one big sluicing, but in 1939 they put a tunnel from there all the way to electric works because in GC3 they needed 2 million gallons of water. I got under an hour, but it's a day going through to produce the ethyl dibromide. It's an element in warm water. Here we are, look, that's Carnsue. That was built in 1834. So that came in its own. And They built that then because there were sluice gates there. And up there, that's Cornish Copper Company up there. Well, they built sluice gates, so they hold the water back, because as you know in Ale, the sand is shifting all the time. So they'd hold the water back, open up the sluice gates when the tide's out, and that would then move the sand. Well, what they was doing was, because Henry Harvey was over here with his key, all the sand was coming this way. So in 1834, he had all this built, he put 2 big sluice gates in there, and then he would do exactly the opposite. Pushing over that way. But we kept it, so it's, you know, in the Second World War it really proved important. I'll go on from there. That's just that was GC. There we are. That's what the alkaline process is, but you don't really want to watch that, really, do you? Now that's where the key was. Now they built that, as I said, in 1939, opened in 1940. They closed it in 1954. Closed it down again for this was the alkaline system, and they went to acid. They built the sulfuric acid in there where the glassworks was. On with the next acid process, you see. I'll go on from there. This electric crane, so we'll work on that. This was completed, I know it was completed in 1956. And the reason, the next one was it? No, go back to there. Look at these. This is the acid. They were like giant hoovers. They was pumping air in all